It's time for my impressions for today, and today I want to take a leaf out of Claire and Robert's interview and start to understand what really was going on in that space. You heard how hard it was to get their product onto Amazon, and that makes me think about barriers to entry. Barriers to entry is a big thing for entrepreneurs, and very often when we see a barrier to entry, we don't go into those businesses because it's tough. And also, many entrepreneurs find themselves in low barrier to entry businesses. And of course, if you can do it, so can tens of thousands of other people to do it as well. So I prefer businesses that have got an optimal barrier to entry. So let me unpack what I mean by optimal barrier to entry. So optimal barrier to entry is just enough barrier to entry to make it difficult for 95% of the market to get in, but enough space for you to get in, provided 5 things are in place. What are those 5 things? Number 1, that you've got enough time to overcome that barrier to entry. So if there's an opportunity, there's a barrier to entry, and it's going to take 6 years to get through that barrier to entry, perhaps it's a bad idea. But if it's going to take 6 months, as in Claire and Robert's business, well, maybe that's just the optimal time for you to actually push through that barrier to entry. Number 2, of course, is the easy one, is the money. Do you have enough money to wait until you can get over that barrier to entry? And barriers to entry are things like legislation around capital requirements, all sorts of things that prevent you from getting into an industry. The third thing to think about is there enough upside on the other side of the barrier? Is the effort, does the effort justify the upside? Can you make enough money, not enough money, much more money in the future if you overcome this barrier? So that's a risk-reward question that you always have to ask yourself. If there is very little upside, then it's probably not worth the effort. The fourth question to ask is the market on the other side on incline or decline? Any market that there's a barrier to entry and the market's on a decline on the other side, don't bother. I wouldn't bother going after those markets. And that leads us to the barrier itself. The fifth question to ask, is the barrier itself on an incline or decline? In other words, is it becoming harder and harder to get into that industry, or easier? If it's getting harder and harder, for me, that's a signal to try. If it's getting easier and easier, it's a signal not to try, because once again, if it's getting easier and easier, then the barrier to entry drops and more people enter that market. It's a good indicator for you whether there is a lucrative market on the other side. Well, I hope you have